Alright everyone, it's time for something that's very, very concerning here, which is the fact that the Dayton shooter, Connor Betts, right now there's some gaslighting going on within the legacy media. Now, see, he was motivated, it seems, by, in part, socialism, and in part by the fact that he was radicalized with regards to right-wing violence. What you've got here is a situation where the legacy media is peddling the largely false line that there is some sort of epidemic of right-wing political violence in the U.S. Unfortunately, what this does, and I've mentioned this now for years that this would happen, is that people that are on the far left would react to that. They'll assume that it's true. They'll start arming up. They'll start acting more potentially aggressive. Then they do things like happen in Dayton. Then people on the right start arming up. And it feeds in, what you have is a feedback mechanism where both of the extremes start getting more extreme, more potentially violent, and you have a lot of problems. This is directly the result, most purely, other than the shooters themselves making the decision to go flip out and shoot people, which is their fault entirely and solely. Beyond that, the main fault lies with propagandists, the legacy media, their legacy corporate allies, and then politicians that are sort of part of that neocon, neo-lib movement that seeks to cast off people on the so-called other side as inherently deplorable. They dehumanize them, and so it's okay to punch Nazis. Oh, it's okay to punch Antifa members, and so therefore it's a form of dehumanization. Now, interestingly, our favorite propagandist Jared Holt was actually being retweeted fairly recently by the shooter. This was broken, the story, by Heavy. Apparently Holt had a dust-up with Ali on Twitter, literally hashtag Ali. It was saying weird shit about him, and it turns out that that was in regards to the El Paso shooter, I guess, and it turned out to be bullshit. But the truth is, and this is archived, link in the description, there are two links, the other one's to the Heavy article. Apparently Holt was being actively followed by and retweeted by the Dayton shooter. Now, this is only significant in the context of it being someone who would consider that significant if it were someone like me. If somebody went off, I'm trying to think of this scenario and how it would play out. Let's say that one of my subscribers, one of you out there, goes off and kills a dozen people. It makes my life living hell, because Jared Holt is going to come out, probably make a smear piece saying that somehow I'm responsible for it. He gets RT'd by someone now who has committed mass murder, and I think the Dayton shooter got killed, thankfully. I think he got gunned down, so fucking good riddance. Just like the El Paso shooter, they took him in alive. They should have just gunned him down like he did other people. They should have just laid waste to him and be done with it. But he gets RT'd by, scrubs the tweet, which is now archived. He tries to scrub the fact that this person was doing that, then I guess blocks and unblocks him or something to get him to force him to unfollow from the account, like stuff like that. And it's just really weird. And it's like, what have you got to hide, Jared? Is it because you've spent the last year of your career defaming others and pretending that others are responsible for those they associate with? It's like, well, you associate with white nationalists, you associate with this group and that group. You associate with groups directly associated with, in the most literal sense, the Dayton shooter. Does that make you culpable for his actions? No, of course, no. The answer is no, but that's the thing. He doesn't acknowledge that with regards to other people. So somebody like me is hate adjacent or alt-right adjacent based on a YouTube interview. He, meanwhile, talks to people, puts material out there, apparently helped to radicalize this shooter, according to his own standards of so-called logic, and of course, he sees no problem with that, doesn't want to address the issue. He doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions according to his own concept of what that means. That's basically what it boils down to, or so it seems. And it's a real problem. Get a lot of hypocrisy. Here's the fundamental point, though, that I would make. The legacy media needs to shut the goddamn fuck up, because they are at this point now causing people to become antagonized they've already got problems. They should probably be in therapy. No, they shouldn't be owning guns. They might need to go into a nut ward. But the legacy media is now convincing people that are on the left or on the right that people on this so-called other side, which has been concocted largely artificially by the same fucking legacy media, are arming up and getting ready for Armageddon. If you convince people who are already on the edge that that's the case, yes, more of them are likely to become violent. But the thing is, if they were to acknowledge the truth to the American people and say, look, violent crime overall, regardless of this mass shooting bullshit, violent crime is actually at a near half-century low. You're much more likely to get murdered by somebody using a knife or a hammer or something than a gun anyway. Assault rifles aren't the problem. By and large, unless you're in the ghetto, you're probably safe, and the politicians don't care about ghetto crime because it involves people with too little money to donate to them. If they were to tell people the truth, how do you sell that? That doesn't sell lots of magazines. That doesn't sell interviews. That doesn't sell front page slots on their fucking websites. That doesn't sell clickbaity tabloid bullshit YouTube videos that get forced to the top of the algorithm artificially by lying to people by omission. That doesn't sell stuff. No, you have to tell people, look, there's a problem with white supremacist shooters in the country. Well, there's not. There's simply not. That's a lie. Then you have the reaction, which any sane, reasonable person could have said was coming anyway. Oh, well, now people on the far left are going to do the same sort of shit. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then the legacy media, its political allies, what they get is they get to force more gun control because they say, look, there's a big problem with this. It's just like the fucking satanic panic. When AOC comes out and says, who's a big problem with white male and toxic masculinity and stuff? No, that's a bunch of satanic panic bullshit. You sound like Tipper Gore and the Housewives of America. No, the solution is just shut the fuck up and admit that the fact that largely society's fine, most people can get ahead or at least get by and large things are pretty good. Except that we got propagandists that don't make money if things are going good. It's what government does too. The only reason that it's even interesting that this moron retweeted Jared Holt is because of the fact that Jared Holt, if it happened to anyone on YouTube, would be making an article about it. So yeah, I mean, he's going to get that back. Yes, you can expect the people that you've abused over time to dogpile you and say the same shit about you. Noting he then goes to, I imagine, goes to sleep hugging his fucking teddy bear, thinking, oh god, a mass murderer retweeted me right before committing mass murder. And it looks like, based on what we can see from the Heavy article, it looks like for some time there he was really interested in the El Paso shooting right before he went off and killed a bunch of people. Now naturally the legacy media is kind of saying, well, he had a hit list of classmates, he had a rape list, and so he was a white male incel, and this is an example. He's a psychopath. That's funny. You're not calling the El Paso shooter a psycho. You're defaulting to his political views are responsible. And they were, by the way. Of course he was motivated by the right-wing bullshit. Of course he was a radical. Not radicalized by 4chan or any stupid... Look, the funniest part is that AOC isn't going to blame the Sleeping Giants or Salon or Jared Holt for the Dayton shooter being radicalized, even though there's a legitimate link there. No, you'd rather look at the fake link, supposedly, between the El Paso shooter, who was politically motivated and psycho. You'd rather look at his connection with 4chan than the politically motivated psycho on the so-called other side concocted by the legacy media, which loves people like AOC. That's what it's about. It's a couple of... Yes, both of these people are psychos. Fucking losers. Yeah, both of them got radicalized and both of them have weird political views. One of them, far right, the other one, a fucking socialist. But in only one of these two cases is politics actually being mentioned by the legacy media. Why don't you ask yourself why that's the case? Could it be because the Dayton shooting is a direct response to their fear-mongering propaganda that comes from El Paso? Of course it is. The Dayton shooter was probably, and now he's been killed, so we're not going to get a confession about his specific motives. Guaranteed there'll be political bullshit coming out, but you probably won't hear about that for a number of weeks until people forget about it. That way they can just push the line of white male and we need gun control. That's basically what'll be done in the corporate fucking media. And Holt will go right on. He probably won't address the issue again. He won't even say a goddamn thing about it. He'll just ignore the very fact that the Dayton shooting ever happened. If he talks about it at all, he'll ignore his own being RT'd by the alleged shooter, and he'll default to, well, he's a white male who had girl problems, that's why he killed people. Maybe so. That doesn't explain all the weird socialistic bullshit on there. He's spouting commie memes in the most literal sense, like shit from the taggies. Well, that's interesting. I thought that it was only the right wing that was violent stuff. Could it be the fact that the legacy media and their corporate allies in government and in private industry want to censor everything and want to make people miserable, and they're using this as a sort of cudgel to do that? They're causing violence. Yes, CNN and groups like that, Vox and Salon and Right Wing Watch, are helping to cause violence. By the way, some of these groups and figures openly espouse violence. Oh, punch Nazis. Oh, hashtag resist. We need to resist by any means necessary. I don't hear that kind of rhetoric coming from people on the right generally. And those that do, they tend to be like the fucking rhino cons, like the culturites and shit like that. People that are a bunch of fucking sellout disgraces. They're not coming from Paul Joseph Watson, who supposedly is a big-time enabler of hate. And they're certainly not fucking coming from Styx Hexenhammer. But somebody like me will still get written up by the Wall Street Journal or BuzzFeed as though we were responsible for the world's problems, as though we were actually in political power. As though we were the billionaires. We're the ones responsible for all of your actions. So, guys, if any of you out there, go and shoot somebody, I guess it's my fault. You got radicalized by my garden. You got radicalized by me saying you should speak freely or that you shouldn't be taxed as much. It's a really radical platform there, dude. Yeah, so it'll be my fault, and Holt probably won't even address his supposedly he's at fault according to his own logic. That's the point. The point is that these people are constantly trying to make connections between groups of YouTubers or 4chan or whatever and any crime that happens. And they dig through it and they say, no matter how tangential or coincidental it might be, this is why the person was radicalized. It's got to be their politics and it's got to be the result of the internet. But then when these people take to the internet themselves, get RT'd by a mass shooter, it disappears. It's not spoken of quite so much. Now, is it? And again, this is all, I guess, allegedly. Like, this is a heavy article. Take that with a grain of salt in some of their claims because it's heavy. Ironically enough, heavy tends to lean to the left these days. Considerably to the left. Didn't they have an article on, didn't they have an article on about how you were a hateful bigot if you didn't like the idea of small children, like pole dancing and shit, like in the wake of that one kid, Lactatia or whatever it is, that bullshit? Didn't they write, wasn't it their article on that subject, or was it Salon? I think Heavy at the very least replicated it, or retweeted it or something. I can't fucking remember. That's about all. Peace out.